No, she's actually got an assignment to do for her course, and I think it would be an imposition. Right. So, but I think we can manage with the recording. She's checked that it is in fact recording.
I will call the meeting of the Transportation and Public Infrastructure meeting of March 18th to order at 6:38 p.m. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. I believe we have one amendment. The item 3.1 PowerPoint presentation on the transportation plan will not be presented tonight. It will be at the next meeting, hopefully. So if I may have a motion for approval of the agenda, please. Moved by Rick McKay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. First item on the agenda is adoption of the minutes of February 2nd, 2015. Do I have a motion to adopt?
Sorry, I have a comment about the minutes. Would we do that before the adoption?
Yep, use your mic.
I just had a question when last meeting, which was Monday, February the 2nd, Rob Martin declared a conflict of interest because he sits on the board of directors for West Shore Parks and Rec. And that was specifically to do with 2350 and 2356 Souk Road. So I am actually also a member of West Shore Parks and Rec. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm not in some kind of legal conflict and whether that decision would be...
You'd only be in a conflict if there was an item to do with that on the agenda.
It was specific to that item because the person is building a gym which will be in direct competition with Juan de Fuca Rec Center. So as a director, Rob felt he had a conflict.
Okay, so just
so
because
that
he's
specific
chair.
item only. So there is nothing on the agenda tonight that has that problem, and I guess if it comes up again, anything to do with the rec center that has financial implications, you should declare a potential conflict of interest.
Okay.
So may I have a motion to adopt the minutes? Okay. Moved by Rick McKay. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Next item is report Michael Baxter, City Engineer, proposed overhead wiring for Veterans Memorial Parkway. Michael.
So BC Hydro originally applied for a permit to install a new hydro supply along VMP, mainly intended to supply Royal Bay, but also that South Colwood area, which is running low on capacity for new buildings. And they applied for a permit to install underground. But they have since asked to revise that to a permit to put the line overhead. As I've recorded in the report, the right-of-way permit was issued. But it's now expired because they didn't do the work during the allowed time. The reason that they gave for asking to go overhead instead of underground is that when they looked at the cost of the underground, once they got down to detailed costing, they realized it didn't fit in the budget that they had available for the project. Normally, if they need more money, they have to go and ask BC Utilities Commission to approve more money for this project, because obviously that BC Utilities Commission controls their rate for each kilowatt hour of electricity, and it is through that rate that they recover these costs. Apparently BCUC does not approve the additional funding of going underground, but requires that they go overhead. Now for the city, this has a number of disadvantages. easiest one to visualize is the visual blight of overhead wires. This is why cities spend a great deal of money to put these wires underground, particularly on their commercial routes or major routes. Some will argue that it's also less secure in that falling trees or errant vehicles can take down a line or a pole. On the other hand, BC Hydro argues that the line's a lot easier to fix, find the fault and fix it if it's overhead. I'm not expert enough on the issue to declare one way or the other is correct. So we've given some options, given that BC Hydro has told us that they have the authority to require us to issue the permit as requested. And the options are either just accept the report for information, in which case we would award, well, I guess you should be recommend to council that it be accepted for information. BC Hydro would then be awarded the permit, or staff could be directed to negotiate a modified version of an overhead line where the line is, say, underground from Souk Road as far as the CRD water pump station, because that is probably future commercial frontage along there.
Where is that CRD water pump station?
I don't believe it's actually built yet.
Oh.
It could be.
Because I drove up there, I thought,
It's just more or less opposite the entrance to Pattison Pit.
which pit?
Pattison, there's Allendale Pit,
Oh, yeah.
and then the pit that's the big hole full of water a lot of the time, that's Pattison Pit.
How far past there?
It's immediately, the entrance to Pattison Pit is immediately adjacent. It's the south side of Allendale Pit.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah. And underground in front of the proposed new development at 3476 Wishart. So that's the property that is immediately north of Havenwood Park on the east side of the road. And underground opposite the Victoria Walk development, which is an area where there will be another development if the current zoning is fulfilled.
Now, I don't quite understand the connection of 3476 Wishart.
Well,
If not VMP.
that's the address of the property, but it actually goes all the way from
All the way
Wishart to
up.
VMP.
Okay, got you.
Yeah. Yeah, that is confusing. And that the rest of the line be overhead, but without any overhead guys, that should say any overhead guys or braces crossing the road. We don't know how tough that negotiation will be, but at least that's a cheaper option than the other way. And we would have to report back on the results of that negotiation. Or direct staff to obtain a legal opinion regarding the powers of BC Hydro to build overhead lines despite municipal refusal to grant a permit for such. And the financial implications are the short-term financial implications in getting a legal opinion, which we estimate to be in the low thousands of dollars, or possibly low hundreds, depending on how familiar the solicitors are with this issue, how much research they have to do, and there are long-term financial implications of an overhead line, and that the city may one day decide that it wants to put the line underground. Grants are available from BC Hydro. They usually just cover BC Hydro's work. They don't actually cover any of the construction required to put the ducts under the road. They just usually just the grants cover BC Hydro's work in pulling the line and putting in the equipment.
Why would they go down the middle of the road as opposed to the side of the road? Exposure?
That's a good question. But sometimes the middle is easier to get at because you close the two outer lanes, if you like. the lanes closest to the center line, and you keep the outer lanes open. In the long run, when it's a 4-lane road, which it is anticipated to be, that would possibly be an advantage, rather than closing a whole half of the road. There are grade issues at the edges of the road that they have to deal with.
I can see that.
So we've recommended trying to negotiate a modified version of the proposal, as I've outlined, but I'll leave it to the committee to direct, or recommend to council to direct. Thank you.
Thank you. Bring it back to committee for discussion. Has anybody any comments or wish to make a motion on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some huge concerns with allowing any type of permission for BC Hydro to do something that is against what the city has been promoting for well over 20 years. All of the subdivisions on either side of Veterans that have been built in the last 20, 25 years are all underground service. And I honestly don't think it's the proper way for the power to go through, especially if it's going to be more than just a residential service going through. We're talking about it being a fairly major wiring flow, so it's going to be multiple lines. And I don't expect they're going to be like the high tension leads, but they're going to be fairly substantial lines going through in order to service the rest of Colwood, possibly Machosen, and some other areas. The other part of my concern is that from an equity standpoint, the municipality has, over the last years with development permits that they've issued, stipulated that all services are to be underground. So all of the contractors and all of the developers that have put the subdivisions in have been forced to pay more to put underground services in through hydro. And now the city is going to turn around and say, well, you're right, we forced you to do that, but we're going to allow hydro to put overhead anyways. I see that as a huge issue going forward, and I think it's a step backwards. From my perspective, spending a couple of $100 or even a couple of $1,000 to get a legal opinion on exactly where the city would stand in trying to tell BC Hydro that no, this city does not want any more overhead wires, even if it doesn't give us the authority to just outright say no, the legal opinion may well give us some more information that might give us some more strength in a negotiating position when we do go talk to Hydro as to how much we want from them to go underground. I'm hoping the whole thing can eventually go underground because I think it's a step backwards, and I would be opposed to any portion of it going overhead. Thank you.
To the chair.
What?
Okay.
Oh, Andrew?
Yeah,
Use your microphone, please.
It's on.
They can hear it.
I concur with Gib. To me, it's a gigantic step backward. And I guess the thing I'd like to say is that would this occur in Broadmead or in the city of Victoria? I don't think so. It wouldn't even be on the table for a discussion. So why they think they can do that out here is beyond me. The second part is I'd like to know what their budget is and how much more is needed. What is the shortfall? Are they short on specifics? And they say they can't get any more money. Well, okay, so how can we be creative here? What is the shortfall? What's needed? Are they really having a backhanded approach by saying, well, we want you to fork over some money to help us? What is that amount? But as far as I'm concerned, it's totally unacceptable, especially on VMP where you're going to have overhead wires. And then this point to say, well, it'd be easier to find there's something wrong. Well, I know there's a lot of areas in Victoria, they've had underground wiring for years, particularly Burnside Road. It's got a huge high tension line that feeds through there, and it's been there since the early 70s. I've never heard of a problem.
Thank you. Further comments? Lilha, do you have a...
Thank you, Chair. I was also going to ask if, in the situation or circumstance that BC Hydro does have the legal authority to shoot us down and put the lines overhead, how much could we have an estimate of how much extra it would be if the city really wanted to push underground? If that means a lot to us?
Yeah, we'd have to talk to BC Hydro about that. That's more or less the question that Mr. McKay asked, which is, what is the shortfall in the budget? So I think that's a good one to pursue. Yeah.
Thank you. My personal feelings on this too are it's a giant step backwards. I remember when we built the Island Highway Whale Road connection, the intersection, we looked at putting hydro there underground, and the costs were going to be enormous. So if we allow hydro to put them above ground here and want to go underground in the future, the costs to the city taxpayer are going to be gigantic. So I would support a motion to deny the permit and direct staff to obtain a legal opinion regarding the powers of BC Hydro. That would be option C. Somebody wants to make that motion?
Gibbs Small, so moved.
Thank you. That motion clear, Mr. Baxter?
It's clear. May I speak to it?
Certainly.
I'm just a little concerned that if we outright deny, that then allows them to proceed under their powers, assuming they have them. Maybe if we sought the legal opinion first, we might do a better job of turning that down. Perhaps, I don't know. And we could also, meanwhile, engage in negotiations with them about, well, how much is your shortfall, and find out how much that is, because that number, if it's not as big as we imagined, may give us some extra leverage to say, well, really you should do this anyway.
Thank you. That sounds like a more prudent approach, much as I would like to. If you would like to change your motion to just be option C.
Yeah, I have no problem with, as a matter of fact, I thought I was moving just option C, direct staff to obtain the legal opinion. And as far as the costing goes, I see in the report, they're talking about the work not starting until 2016. So I don't know over how many years the budget for this is supposed to be stretched with BC Hydro. Is it something that they have a certain amount allocated for each year already for new services? And if the budget for this is, say, stretched between the 2016 and the 2017 year, does BC Hydro suddenly magically have the funding for this project to go ahead? Or if it's just done on a project-by-project basis? In any event, I would move option C strictly that direct the staff to obtain a legal opinion regarding the powers of BC Hydro to build overhead lines despite municipal refusal to grant such a permit.
I will take that as a motion to amend the previous motion, which is already on the floor.
No, since he made the motion, he can withdraw it, and so that previous motion was withdrawn, and strictly option C, and that should read that committee recommend to council that we direct staff to, etc.
Okay.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Next item, report from Michael Baxter, City Engineer, Ocean Boulevard Pump Station Protection Request for Proposal. Michael?
You will see a revised version on the table in front of you. And the yellow highlights show you the revisions. The date was changed, obviously, because there was some delay in holding this meeting, and therefore delay in issuance. I've added in a piece about under project objectives 4.1 on page 5 of the copy in front of you, a couple of items to assess the community feedback and to take into account the community's enjoyment of the waterfront and any effect on the Canadian Wildlife Migratory Bird Sanctuary in their protection proposals, and also to provide the city with concepts using both the Green Shores approaches and others, and probable cost ranges for those concepts, with the idea that the city would then determine which concept they wish to pursue.
What is Green Shores?
It's a method of shoreline protection that is less sort of brute force in rather than simply rip-wrapping. They will seek to do things like arrange the rocks so that the energy of the waves are gradually used up as they go through the rocks. So it's deeper in the sense of it goes further out from the shore, or it occupies more of the beach, but it doesn't completely cover the beach.
In other words, it's an energy breakup.
Yeah.
As the waves come in, it kills the.
To a brute force energy block.
Yeah.
And it often uses plantings to assist. And then the replacement of the pump station I just mentioned as replacement/relocation. We would obviously relocate any equipment we could. And again, on page 8, there's date changes. And on page 13, the date has been removed because it was in 3 different places, totally unnecessary. And finally, we added the 3 maps, which are just explain where to the consultant where all these pieces are. That we. So it's only the pump station at the bottom of Lagoon that they'll be working on under this RFP. They're required to give budget estimates for doing similar work on the other items, and then we can use those budget estimates in next year's and subsequent years' budgets. Because we're not terribly certain, what the consultant price will be to do this. It's work that we're not usually involved in.
So, Michael, a typical RFP, then you're not necessarily going for the lowest bidder.
No.
Yeah. So okay. So the lowest bidder need not think they're going to win.
Yeah, and we've stated that explicitly,
Yeah.
that low bid doesn't necessarily win.
I think it was on the end there, you said MMP in the other notes. An MMCD contract, is that minor works? Or what is that?
Master Municipal Contract Documents.
Is that sort of like a minor works project? Or is it a
Well, no, it's just a standard contract that you can use for anything,
Okay.
really. It's,
cookie cutter?
yeah, and because everybody knows it, we're all involved in less work
Yeah,
managing the contract.
I got it.
Further questions? If not, I believe the recommendation is that the committee receive the request for RPF for the Ocean Boulevard Pump House protection for information. Is that the extent of the motion you wanted, Michael?
Yeah, that's all I need.
So this-
It's just so that you've had a chance to see it, but if you've got suggestions, obviously we're happy to hear them.
Through the chair. And then thing near and dear to my heart, as you well know, is that is part of this going to be to look at fortifying the existing pump station. I can't believe, I'm editorializing here, I can't believe that whoever the design engineer who did that would have put the generator at ground level. I find it just unbelievable that they would do that. Why did they not have it up at least 6 or 8 feet, have the air intakes on the other side, and all the switch gear being marine approved, including the motors, in conjunction with where it's situated? That to me is just, I find it exceedingly hard to believe that we've done. As I said to you before, Michael, that the 250 yards to the east or whatever, is that little mound, the grassy knoll, for lack of better words. That was part of the degaussing station.
Yeah.
And that was installed there shortly after the Second World War. I used to go into that hut with my uncle, because he was a caretaker down there, and they had all their sensitive instruments. Well, the reason they put it that high, that was a man-made berm, is they knew back then that the lagoon had the propensity to have overruns, and so that's why they put it there. And so going back to the sewage lift station, I just shake my head. Why did they ever do it the way they did? I can understand there was reasons why at the time, why it was located there. But okay, well, you take a bad situation, you make it a good situation, okay? You got washrooms. But the generators and the motors and everything and the switchgear should have been all marine approved and jack it up in the air up in the at higher elevation so that you are not going to have that issue, or you're going to eliminate that issue. And particularly air intakes. I mean, it doesn't take much water airborne water to get into those air intakes if that generator comes on.
Yeah.
And you're going to choke that diesel.
Yep.
It's going to go down right now.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of experience working on diesel gensets and emergency systems, so I know what some of the shortfalls are of them. So I don't know if that's part of the study, or is it just strictly relocating?
Well, the idea is that they come up with some means of protecting the pump station so that it won't fail in the event of a design storm, design wave, etc. And that could include simply waterproofing the building so that a wave can hit the building and not affect the functioning of the equipment inside. Or it could involve building a wall basically to protect the building, or it could involve the recommendation to relocate. My feeling is that we are a decade or more, maybe even more than that, decades away from absolutely having to relocate, and that has two advantages. A, we've time to put the money aside, and B, we've time to learn more about exactly how the ocean is going to rise. Because if you put the money aside to allow for the eventuality of moving it, and then you find you don't have to move it that soon, you've lost nothing. You have a big reserve that's earning interest.
I agree with that approach.
Yeah.
Is that let's not jump off the end of the bed right at the moment. Let's take a look-see and triage what we have down there right now before we start spending needless amount of money.
Yeah.
We've got time on our side. But
Yeah.
the same breath, all we need is just a storm from 1883 to blow through. But anyway.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Gibbs Small, a couple of questions. I notice on the diagrams that you've provided, it shows a red line, Ocean Boulevard to pump station. Is that indicating an actual sewer line? Or is that just showing that that's where Ocean Boulevard runs?
Yeah.
Okay, and I was a little confused on that. Like, is that the route that the sewer pump station pumps the effluent to, is up through Ocean Boulevard and onto the system that way?
No, it pumps it back up Lagoon.
Back up Lagoon Road? Okay. And yeah, because that kind of answers a number of questions about relocation and or, what the purpose of that is, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was just curious about the $75,000 put aside for the study in 2014. I just wasn't exactly sure if I saw it in the budget, and I don't believe so, but I saw $12,000 put away for the pump station. So I'm just wondering if we estimated in 2014 that the study approximately might cost more or less $75,000. Are we taking that same approach for 2015?
Yeah, I did actually ask for double that in the budget, but it was slimmed down again to $75,000. I was hoping to do 2 phases of this in 2015, So we do this and then the bridge as well. But due to the budget difficulties this year, we got restricted to just one item, which our best guess is $75,000. We're hoping that will cover the consultant cost and the protection cost. And so by the time the winter storm set in 2015, towards the end of 2015, the pump station will be safe, at least for the next 5-10 years. And we will have a plan as to what to put aside in future years.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The second question that I had, which I forgot about a moment ago, I noticed in the project schedule, even in the amended version, that the request for proposals is issued on March the 16th, which was 2 days ago. Has the RFP been issued already?
No, sorry, that it wasn't. We were thinking that we would issue it then, and if there were any changes at this committee, we would just issue an amendment. But as it turns out, there have been some hold-ups, and it'll be issued tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? In which case, I'll entertain a motion for receipt.
Just Rick McKay, just another question on the general and the evaluation of proposals or information pertaining to the study. Will there be any other groups involved with that, or?
In evaluation of the proposal?
Yeah, and or input into it. Are they just going to be solo or doing their own thing, or are they going to ask input from other people?
Well, the evaluation's usually in camera, because you're dealing with a proposal that contains information that's proprietary. And if you expose all of that information to the public or members of the public, then you basically have revealed the commercial secrets of each company.
Yeah, pardon me.
Yeah.
Let's back up. I mean, part of the information gathering process, I should say.
Yeah.
Is it just going to be doing their own thing, or are they going to seek input from?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, they are supposed to hold a public meeting and seek public input. And I have allowed for one meeting with this committee and a meeting with Parks and Rec as well, as there's an involvement by Parks and Recreation. And I asked them to allow for one further public meeting on top of that. We give them background documents to read, but it's probably would be prudent to mention that there are some community groups that they should talk to.
I'm thinking mainly of our group.
Yeah.
We've got a few people there that know quite a bit.
Well, and Elsie as well. So
Yeah.
because the idea is to gather information, from the property owners whose view may be affected if there are any substantial works built. Elsie, who has one interest in the work they might do, and your group, which has a different interest, and anybody else we know of. Those are the only ones that I know of that would be particularly interested, those three groups.
Because I know I've read just about all those reports,
Yeah.
everything associated with it, and there's some of them, in my opinion, there's errors and false assumptions that what went on down there in the past, and just want to clarify it and set the record straight as to really what was going on, or what's happened in the past, and have a more accurate account of historical events,
Yeah.
along with geological events.
So we should make sure that my memory's failing me. Known the guy for years, the guy who used to run the pit.
Oh, Glenn Willing.
Thank you, Glenn Willing. Yes, we should make sure he's included
Yeah.
in those discussions for sure. Yeah. Okay, I will include those in a final amendment before it goes up.
Any further Somebody want to make a motion for receipt?
Rick McKay.
Moved by Rick McKay. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carried unanimously.
Can you see that?
Only remaining item is to set the date for our next meeting. Monday, April 6th would normally be the date. That is Easter Monday and a holiday. I believe staff is recommending Wednesday, April 8th as a possibility. I checked the committee schedule and there is nothing scheduled for the 8th yet.
6:30?
It would be, yeah, 6:30.
6:30 or 5, I think Nora is trying to make the meetings at 5:30, not 6:30, if there's no meetings scheduled ahead of time. This one I know was 6:30 because it was moved. I think she's trying to make all of the TPI meetings at 5:30, is she not, Michael?
That's what she would prefer, but it is up to the committee. Yeah. I believe that the stipulated time is 6:30 in the terms of reference, so it has to be a special meeting to call it 5:30, but the chair and the committee can do that.
If it suits committee, 5:30 is fine with me. Rob Martin isn't here to comment on that, so he would normally be sitting to my right. I'm not sure that he can make 5:30 meetings on a regular basis, but
Well, let's put it
I-
6:30 at this point.
I would suggest
6:30.
6:30 and then have this discussion again at the next meeting. So the time proposed is Wednesday, April 8th for 6:30 p.m. I don't believe we need a motion. That's at the chair's discretion to call the meeting, so. And the final is a motion for adjournment. Moved by
Agreed.
Gibbs one.
Gibb. All in favor? Opposed?
Agreed.
Carried. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentlemen.
One of our fastest ever meetings.
Yeah, the next one could be longer.
Well, the big item was removed, so.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where Hydro goes with this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That just seems backwards.
And
Yeah.
you're right, they wouldn't do this in Broadmead, they wouldn't
wouldn't
do
do
this
it
at
in
Oak
Langford.
Bay, they wouldn't even do it in
They wouldn't even
Langford.
do it in Langford.
Yeah.
No.
So what gives?
Yeah, and it could well be that this is something that, with the budget crunches that are coming down from the provincial government, it being a quasi, crown corporation, however you want to define it, it could be that the crunch is coming for them and they're all of a sudden say, okay, how can we cut costs? And this happens to be one of the first ones that's come under the radar for them to say, I think we're gonna look at it anyway.
Or is it one of these ones where